Today we're going to be talking about Chuck Yeager. Chuck Yeager was born February 13th, 1923 in Myra, West Virginia. Chuck was not born into a particularly wealthy family, but they managed to get by despite not having much income. Chuck graduated high school in 1941, then he enlisted in the Army Air Corps. Despite not having any degree or college training, Chuck would set out to become a pilot in the Army Air Corps. Chuck started his aviation career as an aircraft mechanic at Victorville Army Base in California. Chuck would finally have the opportunity to fly in an airplane during a maintenance check flight. Chuck became extremely sick during this flight. Despite this awful first experience, Chuck was still determined to fly aircraft. Chuck would then go on to complete flight training only 2 years after graduating in 1943. One day during training, the B-24 bomber Yeager happened to be in had a catastrophic engine failure that led to the plane's explosion and Chuck's inevitable crash. Chuck did manage to bail out of the aircraft. However, during his jump out of the doomed bomber, Yeager was flipped and knocked unconscious. Yeager would survive this botched bailout, with the only damage dealt being a cracked vertebrae. Around a year after his accident, Chuck would be shipped off to Europe. Here he would be assigned to England's 8th Air Force Fighter Command. On March 5th, 1944, Yeager was piloting a P-51 Mustang and was shot down by three Nazi aircraft. Getting out of enemy territory was no easy task. Yeager was thankfully helped by the French underground in giving supplies, as well as a partner to escape to neutral Spain, where they would be safe. This journey would be awful. Yeager would be forced to climb mountains and brave the harsh cold with his B-24 navigator partner, who was injured by Nazi gunfire during their trek. Despite all these obstacles, Yeager was able to save both his own and his partner's life. They both made it into friendly territory alive. Yeager would go on to be an invaluable asset to the war effort. Chuck became the first pilot to become an ace in one day. On October 12, 1944, Chuck Yeager shot down 5 German aircraft, with only 4 being required to become an ace. During his time of service in World War II, Yeager would be credited with 12 confirmed aircraft kills. For his various acts of heroism and bravery, Yeager would receive the Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star, Silver Star, Air Medal with 6 oak leaf clusters, and the Purple Heart. Upon returning to the United States, Yeager decided to become a test pilot. However, before becoming a test pilot, he spent a short period of time as a certified flight instructor. Upon hearing the news that test pilots were needed for a proposed rocket-powered aircraft designed to break the sound barrier, Yeager immediately volunteered. At the time, flying faster than the speed of sound was considered impossible, partially due to when a different plane attempting to break the barrier fell apart at Mach 0.94. The Bell X-1 was an experimental airplane designed to fly faster than the speed of sound. It was powered by a 4-chambered 6000C4 XLR-11 rocket engine. Essentially, Yeager would be piloting a rocket with a plane wrapped around it. The Bell X-1 would not take off from a traditional runway, but rather be released from a B-29 bomber, although it would land normally on a dry lake bed long enough to accommodate its speed. Yeager had flown the X-1 9 times prior before trying to break the sound barrier. However, this attempt would be different, not just because Chuck intended to take the plane over the sound barrier, but also because he had broken 3 ribs when he was flung from a horse while riding the day prior. Despite this large setback, Yeager was determined to break the sound barrier less than 24 hours after his accident. Chuck had to close the cockpit of his X-1 airplane with a broomstick because the pain of his 3 broken ribs prevented him from raising his arm above his shoulder. Chuck was then disconnected from the B-29 bomber and began his flight. He accomplished his mission. On this flight, Chuck Yeager successfully broke the sound barrier, and to everyone's surprise, the flight was rather smooth, cruising above Mach 1. Yeager held the speed for 20 seconds and then began his routine descent onto a dried lake bed. Thank you.